In 2016, during the Somme centenary commemorations, it was common to see and hear a figure of 19,241 fatalities for the first day of the Somme offensive being quoted. It's not known how this figure was determined, but it does not really stack up with the records that are available. Commonwealth War Graves Commission records that 18,607 British Empire and Dominion fatalities for 1st July 1916 are commemorated in France. That means there's either a headstone or they're on a memorial. However, that figure includes the deaths at sections of the Western Front outside the Somme sector, and it includes deaths at base hospitals on the coast. It also includes 40 alias entries, which means 40 duplications. Once the records for the alias cases and the deaths outside the Somme region are removed, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission figure for 1st July fatalities would be 17,487, still a very high figure for one day of a battle. 12,518 fatalities have no known grave and are commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial and a New Zealand memorial. That's nearly 72% of the fatalities. 2,163 of the fatalities belong to Irish infantry regiments, and 2,034 of that figure belong to the 3 infantry regiments that were recruited in Ulster: the Royal Irish Rifles, Royal Irish Fusiliers and Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers. John McCormick, who is documenting Ulster Division fatalities in the Great War from the creation of the Ulster Division in September 1914, currently has a figure of 1,789 men from the Ulster Division who died on the 1st of July 1916. 13 divisions of the British Army took part in the attack on 1st July, but 10.2% of the fatalities came from the Ulster Division, which means that it was a disproportionate fatality level. The next of kin of fatalities generally received a weekly pension from early 1917 and a war gratuity in late 1919. £1 in 1917 equates to approximately £82.50 in current terms, but the buying power for £1 in 1990 and 1920 equates to £54 and £49 respectively. For the purposes of consistency, I'll be uplifting the pension and war gratuities amounts to current terms using the 1920 figures as a base. That's just to explain that. So as I go through, I'll be saying so-and-so got a war gratuity, and in current terms, that's what. I do that to try and give people an idea of how much value was put on a man's life. So to move on into talking about the fatalities from the 2 Belfast shipyards, or the 2 main Belfast shipyards. The Workman Clark Belfast Shipyard Memorial was unveiled on the 8th of August 1919 by Sir Edward Carson. The memorial commemorates 136 men, 20 of whom were killed in action on 1st July 1916. Possibly one of the most impressive war memorials erected, certainly for a commercial concern. The Harrington Wolff Queen's Island Memorial was unveiled on the 1st of April 1921 by Lady Perry. The memorial commemorates 491 fatalities, at least 40 of whom were killed in action on 1st July 1916. So that just gives you some details about the 2 memorials for the 2 Belfast shipyards. So what I'm going to be doing is giving details on 20 men, 10 from the Workman Clark shipyard and 10 from Harrington Wolff, and they'll be interspersed, so they won't be in strict alphabetical order. Joseph McCann Agnew was born on 16th June 1897 at Avon Street in the Victoria Ward to James Graham Agnew and Elizabeth McCann, being the youngest of their 2 sons. His father was a joiner, possibly in a shipyard, but possibly not, and the family was living at 19 Ravenscroft Street in 1911, when Joseph was recorded as being a message boy. Joseph Agnew was serving with 10th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles when he died at the age of 19. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet, or one of the memorial tablets, in Westbourne Presbyterian Church. James and Elizabeth Agnew lost their other son, when William Agnew was killed in action on 2nd August 1916 while surfing with the Seaforth Highlanders, still in the Battle of the Somme. In September 1919, James Agnew received 2 war gratuity payments, £7 and 10 shillings in respect of Joseph and £4 and 10 shillings in respect of William. The total war gratuity of £12 in 1920 would equate to approximately £589 in current terms. Compare that to what you would get if you put in a whiplash claim today. William Henry Ashe was born on 7th February 1880 at Ballymeakin in Castlereagh to Robert Ashe, who was a coachman, and Rachel Hatch. William was a carpenter and living at Belmont Avenue when he married Jane Hendron on 1st July 1899 at St Patrick's Church of Ireland in Ballymacarrat. In 1911, William, Jane and their 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, were living at Conswater Street. William and Jane had a further 3 children, the last being born in June 1915. So the last child would have been born just before William Henry Ashe left Ulster to go to England with the Ulster Division. William Henry Ashe enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 10th Battalion in October 1915. He held the rank of Lance Corporal when he died at the age of 36 on his 17th wedding anniversary. He is buried in the Connaught Cemetery in France and is commemorated on the Strandtown and District Unionist Club Memorial. He is also commemorated on the memorial tablet in St Mark's Church of Ireland at Dundela and on a family memorial in Bangor Abbey Graveyard. Jane Ashe received a pension of 29 shillings per week from January 1917 for herself and 6 children under the age of 16. The pension rate equates to approximately £71 per week in current terms. Jane Ashe also received a war gratuity of £8 in September 1919, and that would equate to approximately £393 in current terms. So basically, she was left alone with 6 children to raise and feed, and she was receiving a pension of 71, what we would now regard as £71 per week. Not much to raise a family on. And because she had 6 children under the age of 16, the chances of her obtaining sufficient employment would have been reduced as well. As you can see, the headstone had at one stage been damaged. It had been broken in half, not by any malicious intent, but just due to the vagaries of the weather. And somebody has put it together again, but to be quite honest, they've made a bit of a mess of it. Alexander Bennett was born on 29th July 1897 at Kenilworth Road in Victoria Ward. He was the son of Henry Bennett and Margaret Russell, and he was the youngest of their 10 children. Henry Bennett was an engine fitter, and he died at Grampian Street of pneumonia on the 15th February 1910 at the age of 57. Alexander Bennett was an apprentice painter when he enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 14th Battalion in October 1915. Alexander was 19 years old when he died, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for the Ballymacarrat Methodist Circuit, which is now on display in the Somme Museum in Conlig. It's a memorial which is very difficult to make out the names because they're engraved on a white marble, and there's no highlighting of any description to make the names stand out. But an impressive memorial all the same. Hampton Crawford was born on 20th May 1890 at Hudson Street in Court Ward to Samuel Crawford and Mary Ann Little, being one of their 5 children. His father was a sawyer in a mill, and the family was living at Fordingale Street in 1911. Hampton Crawford was employed as a mill fluter in 1911, but he was employed at Workman Clark when he enlisted with the Reserve Battalion of the Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers. He was posted to 9th Battalion on the Western Front sometime after December 1915, and he was 26 years old when he died. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. He's also commemorated on one of the memorial plaques for St. Enoch's Presbyterian Church, which is in North Belfast, or was in North Belfast. And these tablets also are now on display in the Somme Museum at Conlig. A pension of 9 shillings per week was paid to Mary Ann Crawford from May 1917. That's £22 per week in current terms. Samuel Crawford received a war gratuity of £3 in November 1919, and that equates to £147 in current terms. Robert Burney, sometimes spelt with an EY at the end of his surname, was born on 28 February 1882 at Mansfield Street in Court Ward to James Burney and Mary Jane McEwen. Robert Burney was a shipyard labourer when he married Jane Murdoch, a spinner, on 10th July 1906 at St Mary's Church of Ireland on the Crumlin Road. In 1911, Robert and Jane and 3 children were living at Broome Street in Shankle Ward. Robert Burney enlisted with the 18th Battalion, Royal Irish Rifles, again a reserve battalion, and was posted to the 12th Battalion in France on 26 November 1915. Robert Burney was 34 years old when he died, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. His death was not confirmed until February 1917, so 7 months after the engagement, his widow was informed that he had in fact died. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet in Woodvale Presbyterian Church, again North Belfast. Jane Burney received a pension of 24 shillings and 6pence a week from March 1917 for herself and 5 dependent children. Their youngest child, Robert, was born on 19th June 1916, so just 11 days before Robert lost his life. The weekly pension rate equates to £60 per week in current terms. Jane Burney also received a war gratuity of £3 and 10 shillings, in October 1990, approximately £172 in current terms. Robert's surname is recorded as spelt B-I-R-N-E-Y on the Queen's Island Memorial, but all the civil and military records record his surname as B-I-R-N-I-E. John Hart was born on 10th November 1897 at Clementine Street in St George's Ward to Robert Hart and Sarah Gordon, and he was the eldest of their 6 children. His father was an engine fitter, and the family was living at Kyle Street in Victoria Ward by 1911. John Hart was an apprentice riveter when he enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with the 14th Battalion in October 1915. John Hart was 18 years old, and like so many other men from that battle, he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. He's also commemorated on the Roll of Honour for Strand Sydenham Presbyterian Church, which never actually had a war memorial or a Roll of Honour. Railings of which were later set up around the church were dedicated as a war memorial, but with the recent renovations and rebuild, those have since gone as well. So in effect, there is no war memorial or Roll of Honour apart from the one in the Presbyterian Church of Ireland book for that congregation. Sarah Hart was awarded a pension of 9 shillings per week from July 1917, so a year after the death of her husband. That equates to £22 per week in current terms. Robert Hart received a war gratuity of £8 in October 1919, and that equates to £393 in current terms. John's surname is recorded as H-A-R-T-E on the Workman Clark Memorial. It's strange that sometimes the war gratuity was maybe paid to the father and the weekly pension was paid to the mother. Generally, the weekly payment went to the mother. Sometimes the mother got both the war gratuity and the pension, but quite often it was split between the 2 parents. James Fergie was born on 13th July 1892 at Portland Street in Larne to Robert Fergie and Sarah Crawford, and he was the youngest of their 14 children. His father was a carpenter and the family was living at Bay Road in Larne in 1911. James at that stage was working as a blacksmith. James Fergie enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 12th Battalion in October 1915. He was 23 years old when he died, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for First Larne Presbyterian Church and on a family memorial in Greenland Cemetery in Larne. The inscription records that he was interred at Beaumont Hamel on the family memorial. An older brother, Archie, served with the Royal Navy, and a younger brother, Charles, served with the Royal Navy, with the Royal Air Force. Robert Fergie received a war gratuity of £7.10 in September 1919, the equivalent of £368 in current terms. Robert Hughes was born on 30th December 1897 at Bangor Street in Ormo Ward to John Hughes and Rachel Beck, being one of their 7 children and their youngest son. In 1911, the family was living at Douglas Street, and Robert was a hater boy when he enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles. Due to his age, he was placed in the 4th Battalion, which was a Special Reserve Battalion, and was posted to the 1st Battalion of the Rifles in the 8th Division on the Western Front on 23rd November 1915. He was 18 years old when he died on 1st July 1916. James Hughes, an elder brother, served with 7th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles in the 16th Irish Division. He was killed in action on 9th September 1916, aged 34, and that was during the capture of the village of Ginchy in the autumn phase of the Battles of the Somme 1916. Robert and James are both commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. So you've got here 2 brothers who died in the Battles of the Somme 1916, but in different phases and with different divisions. The brothers were both members of the Willowfield Battalion of the East Belfast Regiment UVF and are commemorated on the Willowfield Unionist Club Memorial. And that's the one, the newspaper photograph. They're also commemorated on the memorial tablet for McQuiston Memorial Presbyterian Church. The original memorial for the Willowfield Unionist Club was lost in a fire and has been replaced by an obelisk in recent years. Rachel Hughes received a pension of 12 shillings and sixpence per week for the death of 2 of her sons. That's £31 per week in current terms. John and Rachel Hughes also received a combined war gratuity of £13.10 in September 1919, and that equates to approximately £663 in current terms for the loss of 2 of your sons. The Willowfield Unionist Club Memorial is particularly spectacular for a tablet. There's a lot of detail has gone into it, and several local companies in East Belfast were involved in different aspects of it, some of them providing the brass panels, some of them providing the engraving of the woodwork. It's a tragedy to my mind that that memorial lay in an abandoned building for many years and then was lost in a fire, unless of course somebody removed it from the building and it's possibly in a private collection somewhere, but I'd still love to see the original memorial. Robert Edward Gregory was born on 2nd October 1890 at Auckram Street in St George's Ward to Robert Gregory and Elizabeth Taylor, being one of their 7 children. In 1911, the family was living at Great Northern Street, and Robert was employed as an apprentice brass finisher. Robert enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 10th Battalion in October 1915. He was 25 years old when he died and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. His death was not confirmed until August 1917, so a full year after the fateful battle, he was confirmed as a fatality. He's commemorated on the Roll of Honour for University Road Moravian Church. There's actually 2 rolls of honour in that church. One was a Roll of Honour, which is this one here, which was commissioned in 1918. And as you can see, it has the years 1914, 1918 on it. The other memorial refers to, was commissioned in 1919, and it's a more full Roll of Honour. And again, you can see there's quite a lot of detail in this illustrated, illuminated parchment Roll of Honour, including the symbol of the Moravian Church, the coat of arms of Ulster, coat of arms of Belfast, along with Britannia, and an angel. So there's a lot of detail in that Roll of Honour. The University Road Moravian Church is usually open on European Open Heritage Day, and if it is on this year, I would recommend that you go along and have a look at that Roll of Honour, because some of the detailing in it is absolutely fantastic. An older brother, George, is recorded on the Roll of Honour as having served in the war. Robert Gregory Sr. was awarded a weekly pension of 15 shillings per week from August 1917. This equates to £37 per week in current terms. He also received a war gratuity of £8 in October 1919, and again that's £393 in current terms. Robert John Johnston was born on 25th October 1892 at My Lady's Road in Ormo Ward, to Thomas Johnson and Mary Graham, being their eldest child. His mother died of tuberculosis at Upper Canning Street on 31st July 1903 at the age of 33. Thomas was left with 4 children under the age of 10, and he married Martha Worthington on 26th December 1905. In 1911, the family was living at Denmark Street, and Robert was listed as an apprentice clerk. He enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 14th Battalion in October 1915. His role in workman clerk is not known, but it can be assumed that he worked in the offices rather than on the actual shipbuilding itself. He was 23 years old when he died, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the War Memorial for Shankill Road Mission and on a family memorial in Belfast City Cemetery. The Shankill Road Mission closed down a few years back, and the brass panels in the middle of the memorial, which commemorate the dead from that congregation, is now in Townsend Street Presbyterian Church. The wooden surround remains in the derelict building, and basically the wooden surround is decaying with time, but at least part of the memorial has been retained and is still in a public environment. Thomas Johnson received a pension of 9 shillings per week in April 1917, and that was equivalent of £22 per week in current terms. He also received a war gratuity of £8 in October 1919, and again, as with others, that is the equivalent of £393. Henry Holden was born in Belfast around 1880 to Samuel Holden and Mary Rowan. His father died on 13th October 1896, and Henry was a driller when he married Ellen Allen on 20th September 1906 at Bethany Presbyterian Church on Agnes Street. They were living at Dundee Street in 1911. Henry Holden enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 9th Battalion in October 1915. He was around 36 years old, and he is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the Roll of Honour for Bethany Presbyterian Church. Again, I'm not aware of any physical memorial or Roll of Honour for the Bethany congregation, which is why I've used an old photograph of the church building. His widow Ellen was awarded a pension of 10 shillings per week from March 1917, and that equates to £25 per week in current terms. Ellen Holden also received a war gratuity of £7 in October 1919, approximately £344 in current terms. William Walter McCulloch was born on 13th May 1887 at Trafalgar Street in Dock Ward to Matthew McCulloch and Margaret McClenaghan. In 1911, he was an office boy and living at Fleet Street with an elder brother's family. William was a shipyard labourer when he married Frances Kelso on 15th September 1913 at Trinity Church of Ireland, and they lived at Lancaster Street in St Anne's Ward. William McCulloch was a member of the North Belfast Regiment UVF and of Belfast Harbour LOL 1883. He enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles, being deployed to France with 15th Battalion in October 1915. He was 29 years old when he died and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the Roll of Honour for York Street Presbyterian Church, and the memorial tablet in that church was destroyed during the German air raids of 1941, when the entire building was left in a ruinous and unusable situation. Frances McCulloch received a pension of 18 shillings and sixpence for herself and 2 children from February 1917. That's £45 per week. The pension card records that Frances was given a warning in April 1917 and advised that she was under investigation. Frances McCulloch received a war gratuity of £8 in January 1920. That equates to £393. When the Imperial War Graves Commission records were being compiled in the 1920s, Frances McCulloch was living at Sandyfold Street in Glasgow. The warning that she received, it's unclear what it is, but it's quite possible that she was cohabiting with somebody, which would have invalidated her element of the pension. She would have still received a pension for her children, but she would have lost the right to entitlement for any pension on her own behalf if she was living with another man. William's nephew, Thomas McCulloch, was an apprentice caulker at Workman Clark and was killed in action on 23rd December 1915 while serving with the same battalion and regiment as William. John Lavery was born on 13th October 1898 at Earl Lane in Dock Ward to James Lavery and Ada Priscilla Shepherd, being one of their 10 children. His father was an engine fitter and the family was living at North Thomas Street. John Lavery was an apprentice boilermaker when he enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles, and he was posted to France with the 15th Battalion in October 1915, 9 days before his 17th birthday. His death was confirmed in December 1916, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the Roll of Honour for Rosemary Street Presbyterian Church, and as with York Street, the war memorial for this congregation was destroyed during the German air raids on Belfast. This is not to be confused with First Belfast non-subscribing Presbyterian Church in Rosemary Street, which survived the Blitz. Ada Lavery received a weekly pension of 5 shillings in July 1917. This would be approximately £12 per week in current terms. James Lavery, the father, received a war gratuity of £6 and 10 shillings in September 1919, approximately £319 in current terms. You can see at the top of that photograph, that old picture, that it was described as the Ecclesia Scotica, the Scots Church, and that was for a long time an alternative name for the Presbyterian Church because it had grown out of the Church of Scotland. Richard Macmillan was born on 23rd February 1896 at Garston Street in Dock Ward. His parents were Thomas Macmillan and Maria Croskery, and he was one of their 11 children. Richard was a member of the North Belfast Regiment UVF and was an apprentice riveter when he enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles. He held the rank of sergeant when he was deployed to France with 15th Battalion in October 1915. He was 20 years old when he died, and he's buried in the Villers-Bretonneux Military Cemetery in France. He's also commemorated on the Roll of Honour for St Clair Seamen's Presbyterian Church. The St Clair Seamen's Presbyterian Church also has a war memorial window, but the only record of the people from the congregation who died is the parchment Roll of Honour. And as you can see at the top, you've got the flags of the United Kingdom, Belgium, Serbia and France. In the bottom, in the centre, you've got a photograph of the minister at that time, and down at the bottom you've got a photograph of the church itself. Maria Macmillan was awarded a pension of 10 shillings per week from March 1917, £25 per week in current terms. Maria also received a war gratuity of £11 in October 1919, or £540 in current terms. James McCann was born on 4th July 1895 at Carnley Street in Duncairn Ward to William McCann and Mary Bunting, being one of their 10 children. His father was a seaman and later a rigger in a shipyard, and the family lived at Glasgow Street in 1911. At that time, James was a riveter's boy One brother, Francis, was a plater's helper, and another brother was a shipyard labourer. So you can see this family had the shipyards in their blood. Whether they all worked for Harland and Wolff or whether some of them worked for Workman Clark, we don't know. James McCann enlisted with the Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers and was posted the 1st Battalion on the Gallipoli Peninsula in September 1915. The 1st Battalion was withdrawn from the Gallipoli Peninsula in January 1916 and was then redeployed to the Western Front in March 1916. Lance Corporal James McCann was 21 years old when he died, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for Castleton Presbyterian Church. After the destruction of York Street Presbyterian Church in 1941, the two congregations combined and the congregation is now known as Alexandra Presbyterian Church. The family was living at Ritchie Street when William McCann received a war gratuity of £8 and 10 shillings in October 1919. That equates to approximately £417 in current terms. James's brother, Francis Ernest McCann, served as a sergeant with the 107th Field Ambulance Royal Army Medical Corps, which was also part of the Ulster Division. William Nicol was born on 10th July 1893 at Ashley Place in Lower Ballysullen, to William Nicol and Agnes Cunningham McKelvey, being one of their 5 children. His father was a plasterer by trade, and the family was living at Portland Street in Larne when William Nicol died of bowel cancer on 1st July 1901. The family had moved back to North Belfast by 1911 and was living at Legane Street in Ballysullen in 1916. William was an apprentice driller and a member of the North Belfast Regiment UVF and of Ligoniel True Blues LOL 1891. William Nicol Jr. enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and held the rank of sergeant when he was deployed to France with the 15th Battalion in October 1915. A misdemeanour resulted in William being demoted to corporal in June 1916, and he was 22 years old when he died. His death was not confirmed until April 1917, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for St. Mark's Church of Ireland in Ligoniel. Agnes Nicol received a war gratuity of £9 in October 1919, approximately £442 in current terms. Robert Skillen was born on 27th February 1888 at Spruce Street in Cromach Ward to David Skillen and Margaret Lowy. Robert Skillen, a plumber by trade, married Annetta Holmes on 22nd December 1909 at the Belfast Central Mission. That was in the Grosvenor Hall, which was next door to the old Unionist headquarters. In 1911, they were living at Spruce Street with their 2 children. He enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with 10th Battalion in October 1915. He was 28 years old, and he's commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial in France. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for St. Mary Magdalene Church of Ireland on Donegal Pass. Annetta was left with 5 children under the age of 7, and the youngest child had been born in January 1915. She was awarded a pension of 24 shillings and sixpence from January 1917, which would equate to £60 per week. Annetta also received a war gratuity of £8 in October 1919, £393 in current terms. I think this is the only man in this talk, or one of 2, who didn't die serving with the Ulster Division. William Nixon was born in 1884 at Blythe in Northumberland to John Nixon and Jane Giles. His father was recorded as being the general manager of a shipbuilding company at Wallsend in Northumberland. In 1911, William was living at a boarding house on Rosemount Gardens in Clifton Ward, and his employment was recorded as marine engineer. He was a playing member of Malone Rugby Football Club and was employed in the drawing office at Workman Clark when he received a commission with the Northumberland Fusiliers. He was promoted to captain in December 1915 and posted to the 20th Battalion, which was the Tyneside Scottish Battalion, and that was part of the 4th Division. and he went to France sometime after December 1915. Captain Nixon's death at the age of 32 was confirmed in January 1917. He has no known grave and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. He's also commemorated on the memorial tablet for Carlisle Memorial Methodist Church, which is on Clifton Street. The whereabouts of this memorial tablet is not known. He was also commemorated on the memorial tablets for Fort William Golf Club and Cliftonville Cricket and Lawn Tennis Club. The latter memorial was lost in an arson attack on the pavilion at Cliftonville Cricket Club in the 1970s. Next week's talk is going to be on missing memorials of Belfast. We plug. Joseph Taggart Wallace was born on 4th July 1885 in Antrim Town to William Wallace and Annie McKean of Mazarine Street, being one of their 11 children. In 1911, Joseph was a driller in a shipyard and was boarding with the Allen family at Limestone Road. Joseph married Sarah Kirkpatrick from Greencastle on 10th July 1911 at Carnmoney Presbyterian Church. He enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and was deployed to France with the 11th Battalion in October 1915. He was 30 years old when he died and is commemorated on the Thiepval Memorial. So although he was living in Belfast, he enlisted with the battalion of the Ulster Division, which would be for his locality. Antrim, being in South Antrim, was associated with the 11th Battalion. He was also commemorated on the memorial tablet for Newington Presbyterian Church in North Belfast. The tablet was lost during the German air raids in 1941. An illustrated Roll of Honour book was produced after the Second World War by the congregation, and I've included the cover page for the First World War section of that memorial Roll of Honour. His widow received a war gratuity of £7.10 in September 1919. Alfred Owens was born on 4th May 1892 at Limestone Road in Duncairn Ward to William John Owens and Jane Service, being one of their 5 children and their youngest son. His father was a ship broker, and the family lived at University Street in 1901 and 1911. Alfred Owens attended the Trades Preparatory School at the Belfast Municipal Technical Institute, and he was employed as a draftsman at Workman Clark. Before the war, he played from Malone Football Club, cricket for the Ulster Cricket Club in Ballinafie, and was a member of the Rifle Club at the Central Presbyterian Association. He enlisted with the Royal Irish Rifles and held the rank of Lance Corporal when he was deployed to France with the 14th Battalion in October 1915. He was a sergeant when he transferred to 105th Company Machine Gun Corps in January 1916. He was 24 years old when he was killed instantaneously alongside Second Lieutenant Philip Egerton Wedgwood. He was highly regarded by junior and senior officers and had been marked out for further promotion. He is commemorated on the memorial tablets for Fisherwick Presbyterian Church, which I've got displayed here, and the tablet for the Central Presbyterian Association. The Central Presbyterian Association was the equivalent of the CIYMS or the YMCA for Presbyterians. So it provided recreational and sporting. They had swimming teams, they had athletics teams, and they had rifle clubs as well. His widowed mother was awarded a pension of 15 shillings per week, the equivalent of 37 shillings per week in current terms. She also received a war gratuity of £11 in October 1919, the equivalent of £540 in current terms. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings the talk to a conclusion. 20 men, 10 from Workman Clark, 10 from Harnden Wolff, all died on this day 104 years ago. Thank you. Question from Stephen Fleming, my apologies. The pictures you've shown, did the families supply these to the newspapers? Yes. Some people think that the army supplied newspapers or the newspapers with photographs, but as far as I'm aware, the army did not have photographs of the men, certainly the rank and filers. They may have had photographs of officers, but generally the photographs that appeared in the newspapers, along with the information in biographies, came from families rather than from the authorities. That's not damage, it's the shadow in the church where I was taking the photograph. Maher, great lecture. Do you know if there was a proactive encouragement by the shipping yards for men to enlist, i.e. top up wages, like was done in Dublin Port and Guinness, as well as the guarantee of a job on return? There's not enough information. I do know that Guinness was very good in that they paid their families a proportion of their weekly basic salary. I do know that Workman Clark established a fund for families who fell into need as a result of men being on overseas service, whether with the Army or the Navy. So they would have given out packages, given out financial assistance, but I don't think it was as consistent as the way Guinness did it, in that it was dependent on a family applying to the fund. And in a situation like that, people are reticent to apply for financial support. They did do things like they gave out hampers, Christmas hampers and things like that, and put on Christmas entertainments. But I don't think there was the same degree of support. Certainly in terms of encouraging men to enlist, there was a lot of encouragement. A lot of the men in the shipyards were already reservists of either the Navy or the Army. So quite a few men were taken out of the workforce. But the shipyards also provided a key aspect to the overall war effort. And so there was an element where some men, particularly the men in the more skilled sectors, were not released. So even if they wanted to serve overseas, they were held in reserved occupations. And that's sometimes why you see guys who maybe enlist in 1914, but they don't go to France until 1916, because by that stage they'd have been able to bring in other guys and maybe train them up. I'm assuming that there was no subscription at this point, and certainly no objective to the way of one, in the way of some of the key works. There was no conscription in Ireland at all throughout the war. Everyone from Ireland who served either did so because they were already in the Army or the Navy, or they were a reservist and were called up from the reserves, or they volunteered. There was no conscription at all, which makes Ireland somewhat unique in the whole First World War environment. David Taylor, what way were the men selected to join which regiment? In essence, most people living in Belfast would have joined the Royal Irish Rifles, because that was the local regiment. Some men who had come to Belfast from other locations would have preferred to have joined another a regiment that was more associated with their home territory. But basically, there were quite a few men from Belfast in the very early stages of the war who actually enlisted with the Black Watch. I think something like 100 men from Belfast enlisted with the Black Watch in August, and that was because at the start of the war, because of the home rule situation, Carson and Craig hadn't committed the UVF to enlisting. They didn't do that until sort of a week into September 1914. So a lot of men who were in the UVF who wanted to enlist went off and either went to enlist with one of the Scottish regiments, and the Black Watch, Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, Cameron Highlanders, Gordon Highlanders all had recruiting bases in Ireland. You also had the garrisons in Belfast. So you get a lot of Belfast men enlisting with the likes of the Norfolk Regiment and the Devonshire Regiment, because they happen to be based in Belfast. But once the UVF took the decision, yes, we're going to release men into army service, in essence, men enlisted with their colleagues, comrades in the UVF. So in that situation, if you've got men from the North Belfast Regiment UVF, they would generally enlist with the 15th Battalion of the Royal Irish Rifles. But that's not a hard and fast rule, because some guys, if they maybe worked in Mackey's over in West Belfast, they would have enlisted with the 9th Battalion with their mates rather than with their comrades in the North Belfast Regiment UVF. So there's a number of different factors that go on, but it did tend to be regionalised and localised. So men from Ballymena, for example, generally enlisted with the 12th Battalion Irish Rifles. Men in Armagh generally enlisted with the 9th Battalion Irish Fusiliers. Certainly from the Unionist community perspective. From the Nationalist community perspective, in Belfast, men would have enlisted with the 6th Connaught Rangers. Men in Londonderry would have enlisted with the 7th Battalion Royal Irish Regiment. And you get guys from Belfast enlisting with the Munster Fusiliers, Dublin Fusiliers, and all over the show. So there was no real hard, and where their jobs kept for them, don't know, Jill. There's no documentation. I know that in Prony there's a fantastic archive of material relating to the Midlands Railway Company, and they kept jobs open for men. Quite often when the men came back, they might not have been physically capable of doing the job they'd done before, but they were generally found an alternative job. Whenever I was looking at that documentation, there was one man who had lost an arm. Before the war, he had been a stoker on a steam locomotive. So obviously he wouldn't be able to do that job, but they found him a position on the concourse as a ticket sales conductor. So that meant that he could still be employed, but he didn't need 2 arms for that level of employment.